Hi, thank you so much for joining us here today for our panel discussion. Today, I am blessed to have with us Susan Jarboe, Kathy Cronin, and Linda Baker. I'm Reverend Linda Burdett. Who am I? I got it. Before we get started, let's take a moment and just center in prayer. I invite you to get comfortable, settle into your seat, close your eyes if you'd like, take a breath, and turn within. Father, Mother, God, Great Spirit, we rejoice in knowing that you are with us, all around us, in us, and working through us. As we go forward into this discussion, be with the words we say and the ears that hear. Thank you, God. Amen. So today I am introducing the topic, and we're going to be reading from the book Rise of the False Gods by Reverend Alicia Leslie. I actually know this woman. She's amazing, and I really enjoy her book. I'm going to read from one of her chapters. The part I'm reading is Why Confession is Good for the Soul, a new look at an old tradition. In my days in the Catholic Church, to receive Holy Communion, it was necessary to be in a state of grace. This means to have no sin on your soul. This requires going to confession. The process begins with an examination of conscience. The person reviews the time since their previous confession to collect sins and to confess to the priest. When it was our turn, we would enter the confessional and listen for the priest to slide open a little window so that we could speak to him. It was dark in the confessional, so we would have a sense of privacy or anonymity, I suppose. Confession begins with, Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. We would then recite our litany of sins, receive our penance, say a good act of contrition, and exit the booth to recite the prayers prescribed. This means to acknowledge our sin and commit to not doing it again, which meant until next time, often before we arrived home from church. But I always left the confessional feeling light and holy, assured that if a car ran over me before I reached home and I died, I'd go to heaven. The church is right. Confession is good for the soul. In fact, Carl Jung said he had fewer Catholic patients than any other because they dumped their sins on the priest. Behind the process of confession and repentance stand powerful spiritual principles. To confess is to acknowledge what we have done. To repent is to recognize error and change our thinking. When we change our thoughts, we change our world. Once we understand spiritual principle, we will no longer want to break spiritual law. So I'm going to stop there and talk a little bit about me. You know that I'm in recovery, and a part of being in the recovery program I work is working the 12 steps. And even though it's not a religious program, those 12 steps go right along with what I read. We need to make a list to all of the people that we have harmed. And then we go and tell these people what exactly happened. And we invite them to tell us how we can make it better. Do you want us to pay you back? Do you want to never talk to me again? Whatever the case may be. But in doing that, we start to make right some of the things that we made wrong. And that is the beginning for many people in recovery of self-esteem, starting to feel like I am not a mistake, but I made a mistake and I can make it right. So that particular reading really meant a lot to me. Not Catholic, I have never been Catholic, but I do know the importance of owning up to the mistakes that I've made and of offering and then following through on trying to make right what I made wrong. I know my panel is waiting for me to be quiet and let them talk. So that's going to happen right now. Linda Baker?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I was not raised Catholic either, and I never had the experience of going before a priest or a preacher and confessing how I felt. But I always had this inner instinct, I think it's called a guilty conscience, that would identify to me. And I think it was between me and my God. That guilty conscious feeling came in me. I knew I did something wrong, and I had to go through a process with him and understanding what it was I did wrong, and maybe under a different religion or philosophy, I might have learned better how to handle that and address it. But at least there is the expression of a confession, whether you're Catholic or not. That was my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Kathy Cronin?
Oops. Got to unmute myself before I start talking. So I was raised Catholic and spent many hours in the confessional. And then they went to open confession and people stopped going to confession because they didn't feel like they wanted to have face-to-face with the priest to tell them, well, this is what I did. But I do remember that part of the thing with the confession was at the end, you were given your penance to do. So there was something like, okay, this is how you're supposed to make amends. Most of the time it was like say a rosary or several, 10 Hail Marys, telling our fathers, whatever it was, the priest felt he wanted to dole out to you based on, and it was this litany of, I did this and this and this, it was like you had to go through confession all the time. And so sometimes it was, but the closing words is, now go forth and sin no more. And that's sort of the biggest thing is, well, if you're confessing what you've done, are you doing it with truth that you recognize you didn't do something quite right and you want to make amends for it, or you just want to dump on somebody, like you feel guilty and I'm going to dump this on you and here I want to tell you about this and I want to confess about this. The biggest thing is, if I'm going to confess, am I also willing to make the amends? It's easy to recite numerous Our Fathers and Hail Marys, but to do something and go sin no more, and next week I come back with the same litany of sin, it's sort of like, what was the purpose? But the aspect is, so getting away from the ritual of confession in the, like the psychologist says, he had less Catholics because they dumped it, and then they would go about their lives and then come back and dump it again. And but for me, it's sort of like at the point in time that I'd make a confession, it's, I know I need to come clean on something and I need to put it out there to make it known. Like maybe like let go of the shame of it, because sometimes if I'm holding it inside, there's some shame with it. But It's recognizing that I didn't act in my highest good. I may have done things, and what's coming to mind right now was about 20 years ago, I had the gastric bypass surgery, and it was on total starvation. And what I did, I mean, it was, you just could only eat tiny bits of food because it didn't process through your body. However, my addiction ran out, and it went out over in the fact that I had gone to the store and bought a whole bunch of sweets, and the body was not able to handle sweets, but my addiction said I wanted these, and I brought them home and hid them in the back of the pantry. So I knew where they were. And then finally I recognized, it's like, I went through this surgery, and why am I undoing myself? And it was sort of like, I finally had to say to my husband, I have to confess that I did this, and I'm high. And what I recognized was I was hiding it. I was hiding something. So I knew it was wrong. And so it was sort of making that confession and coming out about, was also enlisting the help of someone else to help me overcome my shortcomings, and recognizing that I'm just human and I'm frail and there are things that I do wrong, and how can I go forward and make better of this? So it's sort of confession is definitely a great way um, for clearing your consciousness. But I think one of the biggest words that comes along with confessing is forgiveness, forgiving yourself for that. You're asking someone else to forgive you if you harmed them, but can you forgive yourself for what it was you did? So I think with confession, you've got to also go with the intent to make, to not sin again, and forgive yourself for those behaviors. So thank you for bringing that topic. That was very interesting.
Thank you, Kathy. And wow, you had so many really great points there. In a 12-step program, when I go to make my amends, do my confession, I only talk about my part in it. So I couldn't, and I'm making this up, this did not happen, but I couldn't say, I know you ran over my cat, so I poked holes in all of your tires. I could say, I'm the one who poked holes in all your tires, but I won't talk about your behavior or why I did it. I don't want to justify it. I don't want you to excuse me. I want you to know exactly what I've done. Now, if you say, why did you do that? I will answer that question. But when I go to make my amends, I'm just owning my part. I'm just saying, this is what I did. How can I make it better? And in that circumstance, I would offer to pay for repairs or pay for new tires because I had done the damage. And the person could say, I hate you, I'll never talk to you again, or you owe me a new car, tires isn't enough, or whatever. But my self-esteem, I feel like I've done my very best to try and make it right. And that's where forgiveness for me happens. I can self-forgive knowing that I admitted it, I owned my behavior, and I did everything in my power to make it better. Thank you for that. Susan?
Well, I can say that all of you are good examples for me in terms of how to manage myself and manage my life. One of the things that I have grown over the years is that when I was younger, a lot younger, it was really hard to say, I'm sorry to someone. This sort of loss of face. And so all I wanted to do was get it out of my head as soon as I could and forget about it. And nowadays, it's easy for me to say, I'm sorry. Whoops, I blew it. And sometimes what happens is a conversation will emerge from that, and both of us end up knowing each other better. And so confession, like Kathy was pointing out, it isn't just a matter of saying the prayers. There's action that needs to be taken. And it isn't just a matter of our receiving forgiveness from someone, but I think it contributes to relational development. Just thought.
I love that. I like the example because this is a true one of breaking the copier at work. No matter where I've worked or what kind of printer or copier we've had, I have always had a relationship with that machine. And I learned early on to admit and tell you, I don't know what I've done, but the copier is not working. It was me. I was trying to do this and it jammed. I found that if I go and tell you that I did it, you're most likely to say, oh, I know exactly what that is. Let me help you. Or, okay, we'll call the repairman. But if I keep my mouth shut and don't say anything, and you go to use the copier and find out it's not working, it's jammed, you cannot make your copies, you're going to become outraged and start screaming and yelling. And I'm not going to want to tell you I did it. If I tell you, even before you know there's a problem, I'm clear, I made the mistake. I've owned it. I'm telling you, I don't know how to fix it. This is the problem I created. And almost always, whoever I'm talking to says, oh, thank you for telling me. Let me help you make it better instead of punishing me. Although you get that one person who says, you shouldn't make copies. Let me do it instead. But that's kind of my example for apologizing and saying I'm sorry. Any other comments? Linda?
Yeah, I like that one lesson you just gave me. I hope I always remember it, about I'm the one that poked the holes in your tires, and don't say why unless you get asked. I caught something in that. I thank you for that. Something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, when I was a kid, I remember I used to try to confess I did so and so. Yes, I'm the one who did it. Whereas before it was always my brother did it, or he would say she did it, and they would always believe him, not me. But anyway, when I did try to confess it, I wasn't asked why, but I did continue to get a spanking for it. And so I didn't get off any way because I told the truth. So that's something to think about, I think, for parents, if they're listening to this. If a kid does come up and confesses to it, you got to give them a little leeway, right?
Yes, because that kid could have been terrified. And you just reminded me of something that happened in my childhood. I was playing with the girls across the street. We were playing in their garage, and in the garage was a radio, those plastic radios, think the 50s. And somehow I broke it. And I just felt terrorized because I knew that I had to go tell their father that I had done this. Now, looking back, I can see that if it was a valuable radio, it wouldn't have been in the garage. And but I was terrified. The man was big. He had a big belly. He was hairy all over. And behaviorally, he never did anything to me. But I went in and I was shaking. And I told him, I'm sorry, but I broke your radio. And he said, okay. He said, that's all right. Yeah. And so what you just said, Linda, about parents or adults, let's just say adults, understanding how scared a kid might be to own up to something. I was just terrified.
Okay, Kathy.
I want to comment because this brought back a memory for me where she talks about, being terrified when you've done something and owning up. And sometimes a lot of reasons we don't say anything about it, we try to hide it, is we are afraid of the repercussions. And it just brought back to a memory because it's something I just did over the weekend. I had this wonderful little Cocker Spaniel, Buffy. And Buffy, when we'd go, did you do that? She'd get this lower lip that would quiver, she'd just look at you. She knew she had done wrong and she just sort of quivered. She couldn't confess, but it came out. And so over the weekend, something with my husband, it came up that I had done something. So I sat there and I was like, I said, I'm doing a Buffy and I'm quivering. My little lower lip was quivering like, I did this, so have pity on me. So that's a really great point to think about, is that when, anybody, but especially a child who's terrified of dealing with the big people, the giants, is that compassion to have for them, that they, confessed up, helps them to grow in the fact of being open to confessing, and openness about that truth on things. And I think it also curbs behaviors that they don't need to have to confess, because they just be, sort of like, okay, I was angry at that point and I did this and this was the outcome of it. But they were so good about treating me with this, I won't do this again. So that was just my thought. I thought about my little Buffy and her quivering lip about confessing. That was her confession.
I love it. Animals are so precious. And it's easy to see what they're feeling in their body language. It can be easier with animals than people. Susan, did you have another comment? Okay, I'm going to make another comment, and this might start a whole nother round of discussion, which I'm open to. So, talking about parents and adults mismanaging situations. When I was in elementary school, I don't even know what year, somebody threw a spitball or something at a teacher. And the teacher said we all had to sit there in class until someone confessed. Well, I was more afraid of my home life and what would happen if I got home late than I was of that teacher. So I confessed. I could not be late. So I raised my hand and said I did it. And the teacher confronted me, let everybody else leave the class, and turned on me and said, why did you say you did it? You didn't do it. Well, I was in tears. And I said, because I cannot be late. I absolutely cannot. So the teacher's intention was to give peer pressure to be so strong on the kid that the kid would confess, without realizing how much jeopardy he might be putting the students he was using as, peer pressure to push on the other kid, what kind of danger they'd be in. So just kind of mismanagement by adults. He couldn't make us be late.
On the positive side of that is where the guilty conscience comes in. That kid that got away with that, he left. But I believe, I have faith that that's when God put that guilty conscience seed in him, and it became an issue between he and God.
Okay, and hopefully you're right, but I believe that teacher learned a lesson about valuing the time and commitment of the other students. The idea that he would hold the entire class hostage because one kid wouldn't confess to whatever it was he did. And I'm not even sure. I think it was a spitball, but I don't know what they did. But putting everybody else in jeopardy and at risk for one kid, I hope the adult learned a lesson in that too. Okay, other comments?
Well, your story, maybe all of you have experienced this, is that when one kid misbehaves, nobody gets to go to recess. I always thought that was really unfair. And it was always a boy who misbehaved, and not a girl. I mean, I'd think, well, why can't the girls go out and play? Because it was obviously a boy who did that. But your taking on the spitball reminds me of Therese of Lisieux. She's a saint, and she wrote an autobiography. And one of the things she wrote about was a novice had broken a vase. She, Therese, said, "I did it." And she thought she was so virtuous because she was taking on the sin of this other person. And that wasn't wonderful to do that self-sacrifice. And when I first read that, I thought, no, because she's depriving the other person of the opportunity to learn and grow. And so it's interesting, this talk about confession. I'm pulling together things in my head I never thought about before.
Regardless of your religion, it is good for your soul. Okay, other comments?
Not so good for your backside.
True enough, especially when I was going through school, they had public spankings. Yes. Okay, well, I've really enjoyed this topic, and I've certainly enjoyed this panel, but I'm going to go ahead and bring us to a close just for today. Our videos are available to you at YouTube, or you can find them at Unity Church of El Cajon. If you look at their webpage and go to their videos, you can find our entire video library. One thing I hope you'll notice is we absolutely have room for you. If you would be interested in joining us, please contact the church. We would love to have you, especially if you're sitting there saying, but what about this? What about this? Or I don't agree with that at all. Great. Come, share, educate, teach, enjoy, and participate. We would love to have you. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and let's stay connected and grow in spirit. We are on Facebook. Search for Unity Church of El Cajon and follow us and like our posts. You can reach us on YouTube at Unity Church of El Cajon. Please subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, and leave comments which can help us improve. We are on the web at unityofelcajon.org. Email or call our church office to receive our weekly newsletters, which lists all of our activities and opportunities to learn and grow together.